Thank you. So my talk today, I will be talking about how I used ArcGIS in essentially setting up the rest of the project that myself and Vaughn Mangal will be working on. So to start off, benthic macroinvertebrates, this is like one of two topics that I will never shut up about, the other one being my dogs. But with benthic macroinvertebrates, they are amazing. They're also incredibly adorable. You just have to look really closely. Like leeches, they have so many little eyes. It's great. And so with benthic macroinvertebrates, they're bottom-dwelling invertebrates. They occur in the sediments at the bottom of lakes, rivers, streams, any aquatic environment, really. And they're quite abundant and widespread, meaning that they are very easily sampled. Also, because they're invertebrates, you don't necessarily need ethics approval to be able to sample them. So we can just kind of go right into sampling. They're also sedentary. So in general, they stay in the same relative area unless they're moved by some external factor. And they also have known tolerances, and they specifically respond to water as well as sedimentary chemistry. Now, when we're sampling these, we often record the riparian vegetation. And so with this, we're recording the vegetation surrounding the site, right? So it's very localized information that we are recording. So we record the distance classes, so from 1.5 to 10 meters, 10 to 30, and 30 plus meters away from that site, going from the edge of the stream or lake out and away from the stream and the lake. With that, the 30 plus meters, we typically just use Google Earth to figure out what's there. And then with the riparian classes, so it can be anything from none, which would be like a parking lot. So hopefully you don't have that near your stream, but sometimes it happens. Lawn, cropland, meadow, scrubland, forest, and wetland. And in forested areas, we also record the percent of canopy cover, because all of this on a small scale affects the composition of benthic macroinvertebrates. And we know that, different, whether it's a coniferous forest or deciduous, it will impact what benthics we find there, as well as like just the level of organic pollution. And so Vaughn and I, we wanted to look at this on a much larger scale, rather than just the riparian vegetation, but on a very large scale, further than 30 plus meters away from that site. And we want to see how land use, specifically agriculture, affects the benthic community. And so, we began working on this project in this past spring, so spring 2022. Still iffy on the years, simply because COVID kind of extended certain years. And so we wanted to look at essentially how large-scale land use affects this, specifically with agriculture. And so to prepare for this, I began looking for resources out there that records and that provides information about, the percent of agriculture in a given area. And the first piece of information I came across was this report called by Neptis, and it's the agriculture in Central Ontario zone. And so it covers like the perfect area, across Central Ontario, from Peterborough all the way down to Niagara. And that's where Brock University, where Vaughn is based. So covering this massive area, which is great. Within that report, there was this table, and the table is percentage of land farmed in acres against the total county or district, which is like great, like that's exactly what we need. However, this is from 1986 to 2001, and upon thinking about that, I realized that's 20 years ago. So realized this might be a little bit out of date. So that's fine. I kept searching for something and I came across this. So the agricultural census from MPAC, which is the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. So like essentially like assess your property, figure out what your taxes are. Great people, love them. And so again, they had a very similar table. They have the different counties and districts. They have the land and crops, total pasture land, woodland, wetland, other land, area less, woodland, wetland, and other land, percent non-farm, total farm. This is looking really good. In looking at the areas, they actually cover all of Ontario, which is fantastic. So if we wanted to, if we felt like expanding this even further, then we could, and we would still have this. And however, I was staring at this map for quite some time, and I realized it was based on counties, which counties are completely ecologically and biologically arbitrary for non-human species. We're the only ones who care about those. Granted, like in terms of like if we find a non-native species or a species at risk in a municipality or within a county, that will have implications for development regulations, laws, that kind of stuff, but not the other way around. Non-native species do not care about any sort of arbitrary land border. And so I began to think of what is an ecologically meaningful landscape feature that we could look at. And the answer to this took me an embarrassingly long time. And it was only after I presented my doctoral research at another conference. And with my doctoral research, I was looking at how different landscape features affect ground beetle distribution in Ontario's far north. And with that, we actually found that watersheds, specifically the main watershed rivers, act as a mechanism of dispersal for terrestrial ground beetles, which is really interesting. And it was when I was presenting that research, I kind of dawned on me like, oh, I'm working with aquatic species. I should probably be looking at watersheds. And so we did. And so I was able to find this map, which I already had this layer on GIS from my doctoral work. So it was great. Just had to like add it to the map that I was using. And we decided to select the tertiary watersheds in Southern Ontario. And the M&R produces this map. They also have primary, secondary, quaternary, fifth, and sixth order watershed, but we selected the tertiary simply because that is the level at which conservation authorities work at. So we have the Otonabee River watershed, and that is covered by the Otonabee Conservation Authority, right? And so we can have this direct connection with the conservation authorities and the areas that we're looking at. I wish I could take credit and say that I found this. I didn't. Justin sent me the link to it, so thank you, Justin. And it's the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada Annual Crop Inventory. And it's essentially just a raster, and Agriculture, Agri-Food Canada essentially like determines what the land is, and it's fantastic. They have the sheer number of categories they have here is ridiculous. It's not even just like, oh, this is farmland. It's like, this is lentils. These are beans here. This is deciduous forest, coniferous forest. It's fantastic. And so we have the watershed layer and we have the agricultural land use, which it's not even just agriculture. They also include, like the pink on this map are like urban and city areas. So as you can see, we have Peterborough, this pink dot right here, pink area right there. So, you know, it has a lot of information in there. And so I was able to overlay these two maps, these two layers, and have the watershed, you know, kind of showing above the agricultural census layer. And after speaking with or emailing with Justin, I emailed him so many times, so many questions over the summer. And he recommended that I run a zonal histogram, which essentially takes the watershed and imposes that on the agricultural census layer below that. So then I'm able to essentially look at this in terms of each watershed individually. And so the zonal histogram spits out this Excel sheet with all the different tertiary watersheds. We have along the top, it's pretty small, but we have water, exposed land / barren, urban developed, shrubland, wetland, peatland, grassland, so many different features. It goes on for a very long time. But again, we were specifically interested in agriculture. And so from this, counts it out in little rasters, and I was able to take the total area of each tertiary watershed and work out a percentage. And so we were able to calculate the percent of agriculture as well as forested land within each tertiary watershed. So you can see we have the Maitland River watershed, which has about 80% agriculture. It's down in Southern Ontario, so like that makes sense. Well, I wouldn't say it's like it should be normal, but it is normal for now and for there. It has about 10% forested land. On the other side of the scale, we have the Upper Madawaska Tertiary River watershed. That one is like north of the Peterborough area. We have about 90%, just under 90% forest, and only, I think it was like 1% agriculture. So it was great. Like we have this diversity within our watersheds in Southern Ontario with a variety of different levels of agriculture. And so we're able to go through and actually select specific watersheds before even leaving the lab, before leaving my computer. We can figure out which watersheds that we would like to sample so that we can have this beautiful gradient of agricultural land within our study. And from here, we were able to contact each of the conservation authorities. So there's Orca, we contacted Maitland as well, just because they had 80% agriculture. So it was like, yes, we'll definitely want to be sampling there. And so in contacting them, many of these many of these conservation authorities already perform benthic sampling on their own. And so we're able to work with them, use previous year's data, and continue to, do our own sampling in areas that they have sampled previously. And so with this, we have been able to use ArcGIS to improve our experimental design in ecological studies. We can take landscape properties on a very large scale and use that to inform the large scale selection of watersheds, so a large landscape feature. And then we can incorporate all of that into our specific site selection and select targeted sites before even leaving our computer, before even heading into the field. And I have no results because we haven't even started sampling yet. So, but thank you, and I can take any questions now.